Nitai Guranga, 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 Haribol, 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 Haribol,
Chaitanya Bhagavat, Antya Leela, Chapter 1. I worship the two brothers, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. They are the most magnanimous Supreme Lords, transcendentally situated and embodying inconceivable spiritual potency. These two Supreme Controllers have now appeared on this earth in their eternal forms. O Lord, I offer my repeated obeisances at your lotus feet. You are the Supreme Absolute Truth, fully cognizant of the past, present, and future. You have now appeared as the son of Sri Jagannath Mishra. I also offer my fallen obeisances at the feet of all your devotee servitors, who are your sons, the Goswamis in the renounced order of life, and the congregational chanting of the holy name which you fathered and propagate. Your consorts, Vishnu Priya, who is the Bhudevi potency, Lakshmi Priya, who is the Sri Devi potency, and Navadvip Dham, which is Leela or Neela or Durga potency. According to the consideration of Mello, these spiritual potencies are represented by Gadadhar, Narahari, Ramananda, Jagadananda, and so on. All glories to Sri Krishna Chaitanya, the beloved Lord of Lakshmi Devi, the goddess of fortune. Lord Nityananda is very dear to him. All glories to the Lord of Vaikuntha and the best amongst all the sannyasis. All glories to his illustrious devotees. Lord Gaurachandra is the friend of the fallen souls. Please place your lotus feet on the throne of my heart. Now hear attentively the topics described in the Antya Leela, dealing with the Lord's activities after taking sannyas and his traveling to Jagannath Puri. Lord Chaitanya spent the night after his sannyas initiation in Katwa. Immediately after the completion of the sannyas ceremonies, the Lord instructed Mukunda to sing. He then stood up and began to dance vigorously. The devotees encircled him and joined in the chorus. The Lord was immediately overcome with ecstasy. As he danced, he experienced heavy breathing, laughter, perspiration, shivering, horripilation, and roaring. Then, roaring like 1,000 lions, he crashed to the ground. The impact of his fall sent shock waves amongst the spectators. The kamandalu flew out of his hand to one side, and the sannyas staff went in another direction. The Lord became enraptured and maddened with love for himself. Dancing and swirling, he went to his guru and embraced him with glowing pleasure. In the Lord's merciful embrace, Keshava Bharati was enlightened with love of God. He began to dance, singing and pirouetting ecstatically. His kamandalu and danda flew from his grip. He became oblivious to the external world, and intoxicated with divine love, he rolled on the ground, unaware that his clothes no longer covered his body. The Lord was pleased to see Keshava Bharati in such ecstasy. They danced together, putting the devotees into fits of ecstasy. The Vaishnavas appreciated this rare sight with loud chanting of the holy name. I offer my obeisances at the feet of Keshava Bharati, the most stalwart sannyasi, for he danced with the Supreme Lord, whom even the personified Vedas find it difficult to meet. He was the guru of the Lord of the entire endless creation. The night flew by as the guru and his disciple danced together. At dawn, the Lord begged leave of his guru to depart, saying, "I will enter the forest, and there I will find the Lord of my heart, Krishna Chandra." Keshava Bharati replied, "I will accompany you and relish with you the ecstasy of Sankirtan." The Lord benedicted his guru and allowed him to come with him, requesting him to walk in front while he followed behind. As the Lord was preparing to leave, he embraced Chandrasekhar Acharya and began to cry loudly. Lord Chaitanya said, "Please return home to all the Vaishnavas and tell them that I have left for the forest. Go back without the slightest remorse. I am always imprisoned in your heart. You are my father and I your son. You are my eternal associate." The Lord then left. Chandrasekhar Acharya was overpowered by strong emotions and fell unconscious. No one can understand the Lord's inconceivable potency, and therefore even the unbearable pain of separation from him can keep a person alive. After some time, when he had regained consciousness, Chandrasekhar Acharya left for Navadvip. He informed everyone there that the Lord had entered the forest wearing his sannyas robes. This news deeply pained all the devotees, and they cried out in the excruciation of separation. The devastating effect of the news was widespread and intense. Advaita Acharya, numbed with grief, cried, "I cannot live," and fell unconscious. The heart-rending cries of the devotees could have melted the most cruel heart. Sachi Devi stood motionless like a wooden doll in stony silence, shocked by the news. The other ladies fell to the ground, wailing piteously. Regaining consciousness, Advaita Acharya exclaimed, "What further use do I have for this life, now that my Lord has gone away? I will throw myself into the Ganga, and if you restrain me, I shall do it in the darkness of night." The throbbing pain of separation rendered everyone restless and gloomy. They felt sick, uneasy, and ready to end their lives. Although most of them were grave and learned persons, their minds were now in a state of turmoil. As the devotees were preparing to end their lives and their unbearable misery, they suddenly heard a heavenly voice saying, "O Advaita Acharya and all devotees, do not be sad. Just happily worship Krishna. Your Lord and Master will return in a few days and be amongst you again. Give up your resolve to take your own lives, because you will be with the Lord just as before." Hearing this heavenly message, the devotees forgot about giving up their lives and sat around Sachi Devi singing the Lord's glories. Lord Gaurachandra, the best of sannyasis, now traveled west with Nityananda, Gadadhar, and Mukunda, all the while chanting the holy name. Keshava Bharati walked in front of the Lord, and Govinda walked behind him. Walking like the king of the forest, the Lord was followed by thousands of wailing people. They were all around stamping the forest, but still they followed, undeterred. Filled with compassion, the Lord turned to them and said, "All of you go home and chant Krishna's holy name. May you soon be blessed to have Krishna as your most precious possession. May that devotional mellow, which is desired by Shiva, Brahma, Shukadev Goswami, and others, appear in your hearts." The devotees loudly voiced their appreciation and joy and returned home as if in trance. The Lord walked into the district of Radha, blessing the entire tract of land. This pleasant district is filled with asvatama trees. Cows were grazing peacefully in the beautiful natural setting, and upon seeing this scene, the Lord began to dance blissfully. The devotees quickly gathered around him, singing and clapping. The Lord chanted Hari, Hari in a voice that boomed across the universe, and whoever heard him was purified of material contamination. Dancing all the way, he benedicted the residents of the Radha district. The Lord said, "I want to stay in the forest where the Vakreshvar deity is. It is quiet and solitary there." He then continued on his way, accompanied by his followers, dancing and singing ecstatically. The local residents ran out to see the Lord and his wonderful dancing. Although Sankirtan had never been performed in that area before, and no one had even seen the effects of Krishna Prem manifest in a devotee, they were now offering obeisances to the Lord as he danced and wept in ecstasy. This was a rare experience for them. There were a few fallen sinners amongst them who asked, "Why is he crying so much?" But even those fallen souls were affected by the scene, and by the Lord's mercy they began to roll on the ground crying. The entire universe was now echoing the Lord's name. Yet there remained a few who refused to chant. One who is against the chanting of the Lord's name is the worst kind of sinner. Finally, at the end of the day, the Lord and his followers came to a village where they spent the night in the house of a pious Brahmin. After taking his meal, the Lord went to sleep, surrounded by the devotees. A few hours before dawn, Lord Chaitanya stole away quietly from the rest of the devotees and set out for an unknown destination. When the devotees awoke early the next morning, they found that the Lord had gone. They were again swept with waves of despair and melancholy and began to weep bitterly. They searched for him everywhere, inquiring from everyone in the village, but to no avail. They even left the roads and paths and went into the fields. Absorbed in the transcendental ecstasy of love of Godhead, the Lord walked in the expansive meadows, weeping loudly. He called out, "O Krishna, my Lord, my Father." The Lord of Vaikuntha, the Supreme Lord of all living entities and the best of the sannyasis, wept openly. He cried so loudly that he could be heard several miles away. The devotees searching for him heard this strange crying. They began to follow the sound and soon found him. Seeing their beloved Lord weeping, the devotees also began to cry. Finally, Mukunda started to sing. When the Lord heard the kirtan, he began to dance, and all the devotees surrounded him and happily joined the singing. The Lord then continued his journey westward, dancing on the way. The devotees followed him, chanting the holy names. When they were only 8 miles from Vakreshwar, the Lord decided to change direction. He turned around and went east, still absorbed in the ecstasy of dancing. He was blissful and laughing to himself. Finally, he revealed the mystery behind his laughter and change of direction. He said, "I am going to Nilachala Puri because Lord Jagannath has instructed me. You should come to Puri immediately." The devotees were relieved to learn of the Lord's plan. No one can know the workings of the Lord's mind save his intimate devotees, and then only by his mercy can they know his inner desires. Who can fathom why the Lord first planned to go to Vakreshwar and then changed his mind? It seems that the Lord, in a deceptive way, was purifying the residents of the district of Radha by his presence. There was no other reason for his going there. The Lord now proceeded towards the Ganga, which was some distance away. Although he himself was always absorbed in the ecstasy of love of Godhead, he observed that the residents of the land through which he was passing were disinterested in devotional life. No one ever chanted Krishna's name. Pained at this, the Lord said, "Why have I come to a country where the residents never chant Krishna's holy name? It was a grievous mistake for which I must relinquish my life." Just then a group of little cowherd lads who were grazing their cows passed by. One of them was a very pious boy who suddenly began chanting the name of Krishna. The Lord was extremely happy to hear the holy name from the mouth of this little boy. He joyfully relished the moment and said, "I have passed through many villages the last few days, but Krishna's name was not being chanted in any of them. Suddenly now I have come upon this young lad chanting the holy name. What can be the reason for this?" The Lord then asked, "How far is the Ganga from here?" The devotees replied, "About an hour's walk." The Lord then observed, "This is the greatness of Mother Ganga. Due to her influence, Krishna's name is being chanted here. The breezes from the Ganga have purified this place. Glorifying Ganga Devi in this manner, the Lord increased everyone's reverence towards her." The Lord spoke again, "I will cleanse myself completely in the Ganga today." He then resumed his journey. The Lord walked with the grace of a maddened lion. The devotees ran to catch up with him. His eagerness to see Ganga Devi quickened his steps, and the devotees found it impossible to keep up with him. Only Lord Nityananda, who was also walking like a lion, accompanied him. They reached the banks of the Ganga early in the evening. Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda joyfully entered her waters and thoroughly washed themselves while profusely praising Ganga Devi with selected verses. They drank her cooling waters and offered obeisances to her. The Lord prayed, "O Ganga Devi, your waters are the ambrosia of love of Godhead. Lord Shiva is conversant with the truth about you. You are so powerful that the mere utterance of your name invokes devotional service to the Supreme Lord, and the result of drinking your water is miraculous. By your mercy, the living entities acquire a taste for chanting Krishna's holy name. By your influence, even the wild beasts and birds that live close to you become more fortunate than wealthy men who live far away from you. No one is more potent than yourself in purifying the sinful. In fact, you have descended to this material plane just to relieve the living entities of their sinful reactions." Ganga Devi became bashful, hearing the Lord glorify her in this manner. That Supreme Lord, whose feet are the source of Ganga Devi, was now eulogizing her. How wonderful was that incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Chaitanya. One who hears with faith these verses in praise of Ganga Devi will certainly develop attachment for Lord Chaitanya. That night, Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu stayed in the house of a righteous Brahmin. The next day, the rest of the devotees arrived. Together they again proceeded towards Nilachala Puri. Lord Chaitanya said to Nityananda Prabhu, "My dear magnanimous Prabhu Nityananda, you must immediately leave for Navadweep. Srivas Pandit and the other devotees are grievously afflicted due to my departure. You must alleviate their pain. Take the message from me to them that on my way to Nilachala I will be waiting for them in Shantipur in the House of Advaita Acarya. You must bring them there right away. Now I am going to Pulia to see Haridas." After dispatching Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya headed for the village of Pulia. Having received his orders from Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda Prabhu happily departed for Navadvip. Absorbed in the bliss of ecstatic love of Godhead, Lord Nityananda chanted the holy name in a voice booming like thunder. He walked like a maddened lion, oblivious to everything around him. No rules or taboos restricted his actions. Stopping under a kadamba tree for a while, he stood like Krishna with his body bent in 3 places and began to play the flute rapturously. When he saw cows grazing, he would roll on the ground, and moving like a calf, he would suck milk from them. Unaware of his surroundings, he would sometimes begin to dance while walking. At other times, he would sit down on the road and weep so bitterly that it was painful to see him in that condition. Sometimes he would suddenly stop and shake with peals of laughter. Sometimes he would take the cloth covering his body and wrap it around his head, leaving himself naked. At times, feeling in the mood of Anantashesh, he would move like a serpent and enter the waters of the Ganga, floating and swimming gracefully in her currents. Lord Nityananda's potencies are inconceivable, transcendental, and mysterious. His limitless compassion is unmatched in all the 3 worlds. Lord Nityananda swam in the Ganga all the way to Navadvip. He got out onto the bank, and withdrawing himself, he went straight to the Lord's house. What he saw there pained him greatly. Sachi Devi had been totally fasting for 12 days. She remained alive only on the strength of her devotional service. She was completely imbued with Mother Yashoda's mood of pining for her son, and tears ran down from her eyes. She would eagerly ask whoever she met, "Are you from Mathura? What is the news of Krishna and Balaram?" and swoon in ecstatic spiritual bliss. Then, gradually, she would again start speaking. "There, I can hear their flutes and horns. Is a Krura coming to get them?" Submerged in the mood of intense separation, Mother Sachi forgot her physical cares. Lord Nityananda fell at Sachi Devi's feet, offering his obeisances. The devotees greeted him enthusiastically, but his presence merely intensified their pining, and they began to weep. Mother Sachi cried out, "My son, my darling boy," and swooned. The devotees felt a surge of new emotions tearing their hearts. They embraced Nityananda and were bathed with his tears of ecstasy. He calmed them down and told them the good news. He said, "You must come immediately. The Lord is awaiting us in Advaita Acharya's house in Shantipur. I have come here to take you there." The devotees, who had become lean and weak due to intensely missing their Lord, now received new life. They were jubilant and loudly chanted Krishna's name. Sachi Devi had not touched food or water from the day Nimai left her house to take sannyas 12 days earlier. Only thoughts of Nimai sustained her life. Her condition was unbearable to Nityananda. He spoke soft, reassuring words to her. "Nothing is unknown to you about the mysterious activities of Krishna. What knowledge can I give you about him? Do not burden your heart with despair. Even the Vedas personified cannot receive the mercy and good fortune already in your possession. The supreme object sought by the Vedas is your son. He is the life and soul of every living entity. That same supreme personality has accepted all spiritual and material responsibilities concerning you. He made this promise with his hand on his chest. The Lord always knows what is best for everyone. You should simply surrender everything at his feet and live happily and peacefully. Now, Mother, please go and cook for the satisfaction of all the devotees. This is devotional service to Krishna. Everyone is eager to taste your cooking. If you remain fasting, then Krishna has to fast also. I am eager to relish the offerings prepared by you for Krishna." Nityananda's sweet words were like soothing balm to her afflicted heart. She got up and went to make necessary arrangements for the cooking. First she fed Nityananda Prabhu, and then she fed all the Vaishnavas. She saw to it that everyone was fully satisfied, and then she sat down to eat herself. The devotees were pleased that Sachi Devi had broken her 12-day fast. Enlivened by the prasad, the Vaishnavas prepared to go to meet their beloved Lord with Nityananda Prabhu. The residents of Navadvip were by now familiar with the details of Nimai's sannyas ceremony. The Lord's wonderful sannyas name, Krishna Chaitanya, had a miraculous effect on them. They chanted the Lord's name out loud and glorified him. When the people of Navadvip found out that the Lord was in Pulia village, they became elated and decided to go and see him there. Old, young, men, women, and children all hastened to Pulia, jubilee chanting, "Hari, Hari." Those atheists and fault-finders who had previously spoken vituperatively against the Lord were now eager to reach Pulia with their friends. They said, He was born in Navadvip, but his real identity remained a secret. Out of ignorance, we maligned his work and spiritual mission. Now we must fall at his feet and beg forgiveness. Only then will all our offenses be forgiven. Thousands of people flocked to the pier. The boatmen were in a dilemma. Everyone wanted to go first, but they could not risk crossing the river with their boats overloaded with people. Many found their own means to cross the river. Some went in small dinghies. Others tied themselves to upturned earthen water vessels, which made them float easily. Someone used a raft made out of trunks of banana trees. Even pregnant women braved the jostling crowd. Breathing heavily from exertion, they simply chanted Lord Chaitanya's name and made the journey. For the blind and lame, the way suddenly became broad and facile just by remembering Chaitanya's name. A boat carrying hundreds of people capsized in midstream. This, of course, did not deter the people. They jubilantly chanted the Lord's name and floated upstream. The people's hearts were so infected with joy that it seemed they actually floated in an ocean of divine mirth. Those who did not know how to swim seemed to have miraculously become buoyant. By the grace of the Lord, they were also able to cross the river without difficulty. The sky reverberated with ecstatic sounds of the holy name. The people had only one thought in their minds, to reach Pulia. Disregarding all comfort and bodily needs, they joined the mass, chanting with happy abandon. Their loud cries of Hari echoed in the vaults of heaven as they approached Pulia. This wonderful sound of many people chanting reached the Lord. He came out to greet them. When the people saw him, they held their breath. They were stunned by his extraordinary beauty as a sannyasi. His exquisite face eclipsed the beauty of millions of moons. The Lord was continuously chanting the holy name as tears of ecstasy cascaded down his cheeks. Everyone was falling to the ground to offer their obeisances. People fell on top of each other in their fervor to show respect to their Lord. They did not care if there were thorns on the ground. They were all boundlessly happy. They lifted their hands and prayed to the Lord for his protection and shelter, crying out, "Save us, save us." The village of Pulia was now teeming with millions of people who were captivated by the infinitely charming face of the Lord. The fields and roads were overflowing with people who had no intention of returning to their houses, for they had, even for a moment, beheld the lustrous, benign face of the Lord. The Lord blessed them all with his merciful glance and proceeded towards Shantipur. When he arrived in Advaita Acharya's house, Advaita Prabhu fell at his beloved Lord's lotus feet. He began to weep, relieved of the miserable pain of separation. He remained supine, his arms wrapped around the Lord's lotus feet, which he bathed with his tears of love. At last, Lord Chaitanya bent down and lifted Advaita Acharya into his warm embrace. Advaita, now soaked by the ecstatic tears of the Lord, again fell to his lotus feet in intense spiritual agitation. Calming himself and Advaita, the Lord sat down. Advaita's house was vibrating with loud exultation. Achyutananda was Advaita Acharya's son. He was a charming and effulgent little child endowed with extraordinary intelligence and supreme influence. Naked as usual for a child of that age and covered in dust, Achyutananda came running to greet the Lord. His great fortune was that he was Advaita's son. He was blissful and smiling, for he knew the identity of Lord Chaitanya. He fell at the Lord's feet, full of respect. The Lord lovingly took him into his arms, in spite of the dust smeared on his small body. The Lord said, "Achyuta, you know that Advaita Acharya is also my father. Hence this makes us brothers." Little Achyuta replied, "You are the well-wishing friend of all living entities. The Vedas describe that you are the original father of everyone." This greatly pleased and amused the Lord, and he smiled knowingly. The Vaishnavas were amazed at the child's words. They said, "These words are not the babblings of a mere child, but actually have deep significance. Achyuta must be a great personality." At this moment, Nityananda Prabhu arrived with all the devotees and intimate servitors of the Lord from Navadvip. When they saw their dear Lord, Srivas Pandit and the other devotees began loudly chanting and fell flat on the ground, offering prayers and tears at his lotus feet. These devotees were as precious to the Lord as his own life. He lovingly embraced each one of them. The devotees cried out in the pain of ecstasy and separation. Their cries purified the entire earth. Hearing pure devotees weeping in love of Godhead can free one from the bondage of birth and death. This wonderful opportunity was now made available to everyone by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. Even Lord Brahma rarely receives such favors. Again seeing his beloved associates from Navadvip, the Lord began to dance rapturously, saturated with ecstatic love of himself, for he is the Supreme Lord. The devotees began to sing, and the Lord encouraged them with loud exclamations of "Sing, sing!" The Lord caught Nityananda Prabhu by the hand and spun around in ecstatic joy. Stealthily, Advaita Acharya came up from behind and touched the Lord's feet, placing the dust from them on his head. The Lord's dancing postures were enchanting. Simultaneously, he manifested different ecstatic symptoms like weeping, shivering, horripilation, mirth, and so on. The graceful movements of his transcendental body were an expression of some divine love poetry. He raised his arms in exultation and chanted Hari, Hari. He enchanted the devotees and submerged them in an ocean of ineffable bliss. To again be in the Lord's company by his mercy after being separated from him was certainly a cause for celebration. The devotees surrounded their Lord and danced, oblivious to everything else. They fell on each other, bumped against each other, and rolled on the ground, smearing their bodies with the dust of everyone's feet. Someone pressed another devotee's feet against his chest and remained saturated in bliss, with tears of joy flowing from his eyes. The devotees could not contain their happiness, having regained their beloved Lord and Master. The Lord of Vaikuntha, dancing free from all care with his associates, was indeed an extraordinary sight. The singing of the Lord's name rang out clearly above the sounds of dancing. Advaita Acharya's house resounded with sounds of transcendental mirth, which only Nityananda Prabhu was fully aware of. Lord Chaitanya went around embracing his loving associates and infusing them with love of Godhead. Receiving the Lord's divine touch, the devotees became mad with joy. In loud voices resembling the rumbling of thunder, they expressed their boundless bliss. This further increased the pleasure of the others. As the Lord danced with his associates, Mother Earth seemed to sway and tilt. Nityananda, Advaita, and the others were caught in a maelstrom of infinite ecstasy, and they allowed their limbs and bodies to freely express their unbounded happiness. After a while, the Lord stopped dancing, and entering a mood of divine lordship, he sat down on the throne of Lord Vishnu. The devotees stood around the Lord with folded hands in great awe and reverence as he began to reveal his real identity as the Supreme Lord. He said, "I am Krishna, Rama, Narayana, and Matsya. I have assumed these incarnations and more. I am Kurma, Varaha, Vamana, Buddha, and will be Kalki. I am Prishnigarbha, Hayagriva, and the moon of Nilachala, Lord Jagannath. I am Kapila and Nasringha. All living entities, visible and invisible, are my servitors. The Vedas sing of my supramundane excellences, and I am served by the endless planetary systems. I am time, the destroyer of everything except my devotees. All dangers are easily overcome simply by remembering me. I rescued Draupadi from public shame and insult. I also saved the Pandavas from the fire trap in the house of lack. I protected Shiva by slaying the terrible demon Vrikasura. I liberated my servant Gajendra the elephant from excruciating death pains. I stood by Prahlad in all his tortures. I protected the cowherd boys from all kinds of harm and attacks. I churned the milk ocean to extract the nectar of immortality. I deprived the demons of that nectar and gave it to the demigods, thus aiding them to victory. I slew the obnoxious demon Kamsa, who was threatening my devotees. I killed the demon King Ravana and destroyed his entire race. I lifted Govardhan Hill with my left hand, and I tamed the vicious snake demon Kaliya. I appeared in Satya Yuga to propagate the practice of austerity and meditation, and in Treta Yuga to introduce the performance of sacrifices. In Dwapara Yuga, my purpose was to establish proper procedures of temple worship. Presently, in Kali Yuga, I have come to promulgate the congregational chanting of the holy names of God. Even the Vedas fail to enumerate all my incarnations. In Kali Yuga, by participating in the Sankirtan movement, every sincere soul will taste the nectar of love of Godhead. This is the reason for my appearance in this Yuga. The entire Vedic literature instructs the searching soul to seek my shelter, but I am always to be found in the company of my surrendered devotees. They are everything to me, father, mother, friend, son, brother. Although I am absolutely independent, my nature is that I am captivated by my devotees' pure love for me. All of you are my eternal associates. All my incarnations are only for your pleasure and protection. Know for certain that I cannot remain even for a moment bereft of your association. Showering his causeless mercy on his devotees and on all the living entities, the Lord revealed this confidence of himself. The devotees were jubilant. They fell flat on the ground, offering obeisances. They were so devotionally perturbed that they were unable to do anything. They prayed and rolled on the ground, relishing the highest ambrosia of love of Godhead. The Lord's associates were now satisfied. Their previous heartaches due to separation from the Lord were now cured. The compassionate Lord is expert in alleviating everyone's grief, so why should suffering humanity not take shelter of the Lord? Lord Gaurachandra is an ocean of mercy. He always overlooks the faults of the wayward souls and sees their good qualities. Thereafter, withdrawing his mood of supreme opulence and absolute autocracy, the Lord returned to his normal self, calm and composed. He led everyone down to the Ganga to bathe. He played and frolicked in the water with his devotees. On returning, he offered water to the Tulasi plant and circumambulated her, indicating that the others should do the same. Then they all went to the temple room, offered obeisances to Lord Vishnu, and circumambulated the Lord. Lord Gaurahari called everyone, and they sat down together to eat. The Lord sat beside Lord Nityananda, surrounded by happy devotees. He was the center of attention with his smiling face and golden body, covered with sandalwood paste. The scene of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda taking prasad, surrounded by their devotees, was an exact replica of the scene of Krishna and Balaram sitting in the forest of Vrindavan, surrounded by their cowherd boyfriends, having a picnic with their packed lunches. Who can fully describe this wonderful event? As soon as the Lord had finished eating and had left, the devotees jumped up and grabbed his remnants from his plate. Even the old men acted like little boys. Such is the transformation that takes place due to contact with the Lord's divine potency. One who hears these pastimes of the Lord and his associates, their reunions, sankirtan, and eating together, will certainly attain Lord Chaitanya's mercy and relish love of Godhead. Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu are my life and soul. I, Vrindavan Das, humbly offer this song at their lotus feet.